Yes guys, how's it going? Welcome back to a new video. Another day in the world of a Newcastle United fan. Just a few days after it's announced that Paul Mitchell's sporting director would be leaving the club, I expected maybe a little rumour of what was said over here and a little murmur of what the owners had said. What I didn't expect was a full-blown article by Craig Hope at the Daily Mail, fairly scathing report on Paul Mitchell and his time at Newcastle United, calling it doomed from the start and saying that he didn't care who he upset and that in fact the Newcastle owners were worried that they could have lost Eddie Howe due to the friction between Eddie and Paul Mitchell. And we will get into all of that in this video, as well as a little bit on transfers as well. So, as I say, things are moving quick. The season ends, Paul Mitchell leaves, and we are on to transfers. And Eddie Howe, by the looks of it, will have full reign over who Newcastle bring in this summer. I think that's part of it as well. I think Eddie Howe in recent interviews has been very bold, very forceful with his words, is to say that he wants to make sure we have a good summer. And I think part of that plays into that as well. You know, after having achieved what he's achieved, after really not having much say over transfers under Paul Mitchell, under Dan Ashworth, you know what, Eddie hasn't steered us too wrong so far. So if it's him in charge this summer, you know what, I'm happy. It's happy with me. And the players being linked, Gahey and Buemo, you know, if we can make some early moves for them, I'll be very happy. However, one player that we had been linked with who does not look like they will be joining us anymore is Liam Delap. But don't worry, Newcastle have already got their eyes on somebody else. That's right. Undoubtedly, Newcastle are hopefully going to be looking at a new striker this summer, and Delap was a player that, let's be honest, 17 Premier League teams were interested in, a £30 million release clause, but it looks like Chelsea is the team he's going to go to. And I did think, if I'm honest, if it wasn't us, I thought Chelsea would be a team that he would likely consider going to, because we've got Champions League, they've got Champions League. You know, let's say they offered 100,000 wages. We offered 100,000 wages. What we can't do is offer him a starting first team spot on the first day of the season because of Alexander Isak. And that's always a hard sell. Chelsea have got Nicholas Jackson, who I actually think there's a good player in there somewhere. They just haven't found him yet. But as much as I think I think Delap would be a good player for us. I think he's an Eddie Howe type player. I think he'd work hard and would give him a lot of game time. We still already have the best striker in the world. So it's always going to be a tough sell. Chelsea are able to really offer him that the number 9 spot, whereas we, interestingly enough, are going to potentially lose our number 9 in Callum Wilson. Be interesting to see if that number does make a move this summer. And the player that we are being linked with instead of Delap is João Pedro. Shock, horror, surprise. Eddie Howe gets his hands back on the summer transfers. We're back in for Gahey again. Loves a bit of Gahey. And Buemo, I think people are happy with that, should anything happen with it. And João Pedro, a man who was, in fairness, linked around the time we brought in Alexander Isak. It looks like Eddie's back in for him again. So let me know your thoughts on João Pedro down in the comments below. Is he a player you would like to see as an addition to our squad? I like him. He scores goals. He's Premier League proven. I think for the team at Brighton, I think he's done well. You know, he's not topping the charts. I think he had some injury issues this season, but in terms of what we want, I think he could be pretty good. So, and obviously Eddie Howe loves him. So thoughts and comments on João Pedro. But as I say, Paul Mitchell actually will be here till the end of June, so it's possible that he could get his hands on a transfer before he leaves. The transfer window opens in 2 days, for 10 days, then closes again. then opens again at the end of June. So we do have this small space where I would love it if we could get an early deal done. You know, get players in early. Don't wait around for the end of the season after the summer tour. If we could have some stuff over the line in that 10-day window, you know, can Paul Mitchell save his legacy with some work done in those 10 days? I hope so. But he won't be here for much longer than that. And as I say, you know, in my opinion, Craig Hope really hasn't held back in his views on Paul Mitchell's time. And as I say, it's far to say that I think the owners let go of Paul Mitchell in the worry that if they hadn't, it could well have been Eddie Howe who left instead. It's a real interesting one, and I find this article very interesting as well, because it's really easy to jump on, and I will, don't worry, the fact that, you know, doomed from the start, was like a bull in a china shop upon entering Newcastle United, didn't care who we upset. It sounds like someone who is obviously worked in, I guess, in that kind of atmosphere before. You can understand in big businesses, big companies, big egos, everybody wants to be the best. I want to be better than you. I'm in charge here. I should be doing the transfers. You know, I can kind of understand walking in somewhere and wanting to assert dominance. But the thing is, it just isn't Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe is just the most amicable, like, calming person in the interviews, the way he speaks, the way he comes across. You know, even at the trophy lifts, you know, you had the players on the stage at the Moor. Eddie Howe took his time to read out, you know, every single backroom staff to come forward and have their chance with the trophy. And essentially, the way this article's written and in the way, in my opinion, it's coming out is that Eddie Howe would rather see his 10 backroom staff lift the trophy and stand at the side and be pleased for them. Paul Mitchell would rather have everybody else off the stage and be stood on his own lifting the trophy. And you know what? At the very depths of it all, if you were Paul Mitchell walking in and you were managing Jose Mourinho, you know, I think there would be levels of who does what and who does this and trying to, like, whereas the thing is with Eddie Howe, I just don't think it's worked. I think, especially when Eddie's done so well on the pitch. Now, it's actually written in here that from the very start, his opening words, you know, at the club, saying he basically came in and said, "Get ready to come on a journey with me, and I'm going to make you elite." And the players are like, "Well, we already got saved from relegation with Eddie. We already qualified for the Champions League. You know, we feel like we're already doing all right. And you're now trying to tell us that actually what you've done so far isn't good, and I'm going to take over." And it's just, and let's pretend that was the first way he felt coming in, that that's what needed to be done. Essentially, people hoped he would soften up, and it doesn't sound like he has. One of the really interesting points in here as well is the talk on bringing in his own manager. Now, you get this a lot. I mean, technically speaking, we had it with Amanda and Mehrdad. But again, we'll talk about Amanda and Mehrdad as well. So, like, soft and amicable about how they do things. I think I would not be shocked to think that Eddie Howe was upset with the likes of Amanda and Mehrdad leaving, because they were all in on Eddie Howe. They were his guy. They let him do what he wanted. They're all sat around late, drinking glasses of wine, playing Football Manager, Googling Gahey, Googling João Pedro, who should we buy next? And very quickly it changed from that to, you know, Dan Ashworth, who, you know, I don't get the full read on that one. Some people have said they did get on, some people they didn't. Whereas the Paul Mitchell one, Paul Mitchell coming in, like, this is my opinion now. Paul Mitchell coming in, and the first thing he does is says publicly the transfers weren't fit for purpose. All right, Paul, cheers, mate. Imagine if you're Eddie Howe, that is not a good way to start a relationship. And again, trying to be devil's advocate, Paul Mitchell coming in, wanting to bring in his own man, bring in his own people, wanting to do things his way, instead of wanting to join forces with Eddie Howe. It's not inherently. It was definitely wrong for our situation. I think the trouble is he didn't soften up. If he had that view at the start, that's the way he's learned to do business, whether it's right or wrong. But what he didn't learn from the sounds of things is it's not the way Newcastle have been doing business. And essentially, that's why it would seem that Newcastle made the move to let go of Paul Mitchell in order to keep Eddie Howe happy. It was also written in there. Do you remember when Eddie Howe was having a bit of a tough patch and we were losing a few games? The players were actually saying it felt like Paul Mitchell was using that to his advantage. Oh, well, not doing too great right now. Maybe we should look at something else. It's not great reading. It's interesting to read now because he's going, and it's interesting to read now because Eddie Howe did what Eddie Howe did, and with very little help from Paul Mitchell as well, who didn't bring anybody in other than a Sula who Jason Tyndall sorted, and then, as I say, made a bit of money on Lloyd Kelly. For Eddie Howe to now kind of turn around and go here, and I think that's why in Eddie Howe's recent interviews as well, he has got so much bolder, saying, I want to be having the best summer ever. I've been told there's no PSR issues. And again, I mentioned this in my video the other day. One of you guys commented saying nothing like a trip to the hospital or a health scare to make you realise what was important. Maybe Eddie Howe went, you know what it is? I've done all this. I've taken you from relegation team to Champions League, and I've still got this bloke over here trying to tell me what to do every day. Maybe Eddie just went, you know what it is? I've had enough. Give me the money. I want to be in charge. And the reports are that, Eddie Howe will be in charge of it this summer. And that if we did look to make a change, it wouldn't necessarily be for a sporting director. It would be for a technical director. So I guess Eddie Howe does whatever he wants with transfers and then just gives the guy a bit of paper and goes, go and work out his contract over there. So yeah, really interesting thoughts and comments on Eddie Howe down below. I mean, it's not to say that things won't change. I think Eddie Howe was a specialist kind of manager, which again, on Paul Mitchell's side of things, he got it wrong at the start. He didn't soften up from what I've heard. But it's not to say that he won't go and do that in another team who does have 10 different departments, a person in every department. They need him to stand at the top and look after every department. The trouble was, it was Eddie looking after all of the departments and then somebody else over here telling them to do it differently. In the future, it could well be, a long time in the future, when Eddie Howe retires at the age of 80, that maybe that structure would work, but certainly now it would appear that Newcastle have admitted defeat on the two sporting directors they brought in, that neither of them worked. And I'm hoping that, Eddie Howe can not just prove what he can do on the pitch, but go and prove what he can do off the pitch this summer as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Thoughts and comments on Eddie Howe's big summer window. Are you happy to see the back of Paul Mitchell? Do you think maybe it was more of a misunderstanding than a pure... Was it just that? Was it just two blokes who didn't get on and someone had to go, otherwise it wasn't going to work? Or do you think... you let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thoughts on João Pedro, and I'll catch you later. Oh, and subscribe as well. Still watching 14 minutes later, subscribe. Loads of videos at the minute. Getting very close to 50k. And about half of you guys aren't subscribed. So click the button, help me out. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.